Now, one of the things I always say is how nice it is to have video that we can share the modeling experiences we have. This is from Milt Graham, and he made a real nice set of pictures here. And I'm going to read the caption and then show the picture. Wings in the back of the pickup. These are for his Joker 2. Milt used to live in the New York City area, and he's a fan of Gene Schaefer and whatever. Recording a finished wing. This was already cored, but I'm recoring it to remove more weight. Now, that's one thing everybody does with foam wings. They're trying to make them as light as possible. I can't hate them for that. Raw materials laid out in the living room. Some skinned and unskinned wings. Looks like he's got a bicycle there, or hey, maybe. Look at this. Look at this shop. Now, see, this is the kind of stuff I like. A batch of cut and cored wings with trailing edges installed. He says Bob Hunt developed that method, and I'm sure that's true. Look at the beautiful shop. Now check out the bandsaw. Oh, I always get ideas for my shop when I look at stuff like this. There's a couple of his uncored wings, and I'm just wondering how many... Milt, what are you building, a triplane or what? I guess I asked the wrong question. The scrap pile. Anyway, just think, if you didn't have pictures, you didn't have videos, how do you share any of this? Some more uncored wings with templates. Now, anybody that's using a, I guess this is a feather cutter, I'm not sure. Maybe it isn't. But I guess Milt's got enough technology going on here that certainly looks like it. Anybody would have a question about foam wings, hey? And by the way, Johnny Duncan is now in the foam wing business. And just some ideas, some looking at his workshop in here. I like the bandsaw. I need one of those tools. Look at the food in the background. Is that food? I'm just looking at this. Wow. He's got like snacks galore. Picture shows a set of templates on a scroll saw, extremely precise. And I can verify that. It looks like he has the same table saw I have. Yeah, maybe his is a little better, who knows. I'm looking at this. Look at all the solder and everything in the background. Early morning Thanksgiving holidays, and everybody knows we're going through the Christmas holidays right now. Initial laying out some foam parts. He's trying to use a plotter that he's got hooked up to his computer. I'd be interested in seeing more about how that works. With my computer experience, I'd put something in and the computer would break. He's got a toolmaker's scribe similar to the one I just received from John Pothier, a handmade one. It looks like a commercial one. And a super precision rip fence, something we don't have here. By the way, Milt, feel free to mail me a free precision rip fence. My saw's got some junk on there. You forget it. It's not even to cut motor mounts. Anyway, this is his little trick for, I don't really understand because I don't have one of these rip fences, but hey, I would say anybody interested in this kind of stuff should contact Milt Graham. He's in California, and quite a craftsman. These are some of the things he did to make his saw more accurate, test cuts and miters. Anyway, this is something I'd really be interested in, Milton. He didn't write that. I'd really be interested if he'd write an article for Stunt News on how to set up a saw. My saw, see, I have the old, you make the cut and then you dress the side that's wrong off. Anyway, pictures of Milt's shop. Hey, and I'm glad to share anything I have, Milt. Any of this information you can use, pass it on to your friends. And a nice shop, by the way. Really nice, in a class with Steve DeGiulio. Now, the next step on this project, we finished up the shaping of the part, is we're going to have to seal this finish. Again, I've said one of the ways the RC people do it is they lay half-ounce cloth and epoxy over it, and that's certainly one good way to do it. But we're going to try another way using CA, wiping it off with a paper towel, and getting a little bit of a finish on here, and then building up our final finish. And I've had real good luck in the past with Brodak Dope, white Brodak primer. Now the first step is to check that all the fits and contours are right within the parameters we want. I'm going to get out some. Well, here, this is one of the problems, and it sounds funny, but no matter what you do in modeling, when you're trying to sand a hard surface and a soft surface, you never get it right. So one of the objectives, one of the reasons I like the CA method rather than epoxy is with the epoxy method, it just oversizes the part, it drips and drools, and you have to wait a day for it to harden up. Well, with this method, I can just keep working on this part as long as I want. And I could sand this edge where it's plywood, balsa plywood, for all eternity and never get that edge right. As soon as you hit it with dope, it'll just... Well, by hardening the whole thing with CA, now by having a hard shell on here, what I've accomplished is I'm able to get the final contouring and the pre-priming of a part, and then I'll just need to make the base and we'll have a mold. If we actually were going to use this part, if this were a part of the cowling and we were going to use it, what I would do is soak the part with thin CA first, because that would give it a much better bite into the wood. But since this is only going to be a plug, I don't really need to go to that extreme. But I'll just pick one little area at a time. Never use kicker. Pick a small area. Take a clean paper towel. Don't try using the same one over and over again. And just paint on. Don't leave. If you hold it in one spot, it'll stick to the part. And let it kick normally. Now once we get the whole part done, of course it smells real nice too. Once we get the whole part done, that'll be ready to sand out. Now what happens after 2 or 3 coats, and I sanded a little bit between coats, you can see we're starting to build up a little, like a, I don't know, like a clear coating on it. And now I'll want to sand this to where it's dull and flat, get off all the little imperfections that I can. And this will be ready for, well, yeah, you may even get this primed today, although I think it's raining out there now. So you need 2 or 3 coats. Thick CA, put it on with a paper towel, and don't glue the towel or your hand to the part. And don't use kicker, and you can get a nice final substrate. Now actually the truth is, if you were doing a repair, you could finish the whole plane this way. It's probably a little heavier than dope would be, but if you were repairing an area or whatever, this makes a very easy to sand substrate. Now I've got that, but I guess about 3 coats of this. The key thing here is to take it and candle it up against a light so you can get a little idea of that it's a sealed finish. There's no raw wood showing. This took about 3 coats. I guess 3 or 4 is about normal. Now I'm ready to mount that to a base plate. This is a piece of particle board with some kind of formica finish on one side. I'm going to have to make a little overhang piece, and I'm ready to lay up. This is going to be the first time I'm doing a hard mold with gel coat, so I want to kind of look at different ways of doing this, because this is the way I want to make the mold for the fuselage part also. I'll mount on here fine. I just need to somehow mount a little piece of plywood. Need to do it the long way. And cut up one of these old doublers to do this. Yeah, that'll fit under there. See, you got to kind of invent this as you go along. Little piece here. Possibly I can get that to go right up on there. I need to make a support for it though. I'm going to have to figure a way, put a bevel on this, and figure a way of attaching that right to the end. I don't even know if this is going to work. Anyway, the first time we make this type of a mold, of course, it's for sure going to be a learning experience all the way. To reinforce this somehow under here, because we're going to be putting some pressure on this eventually. This is why I don't throw away any of these old furniture scraps or anything, because I can always use them as base plates for molds. Okay, once that little reinforcement dries, I want to make sure I have this angle real accurate and I can mount our plug. Now the whole thing is to try to assemble this. Make sure we're centered. Tack it down first. The reason I'm tacking it down first is I want to make sure everything is going to be as straight as I can possibly make it. I need to make a little radius along the edge here. I'll do that with some thick CA, because obviously if the composite material gets underneath, that's a problem in itself. On a hard mold, and I need to make little draft angles at both ends of this. Little fake blocks that are just going to be there so we have a draft angle. This end of the plug on a hard mold, I don't want to have to pull up a 90 degree. It'll crack this edge. So what I'm going to try to do is make a little taper piece here with one of my patented pens that don't write. Undersize it just a little bit, go about 1/16 of an inch, and put a taper so that in essence we have a draft angle to work off right here. Purpose this piece is going to serve is as a little draft angle piece, so if I have to get under there with a screwdriver, a wedge or whatever, and pull a part out of the mold, rather than having a 90 degree piece back here, this will be a big help. I'm going to just glue this right on place. Now obviously what I have to do is put a little bit of a finish on this at the same time, because I don't want this to get soaked once I put the Brodak primer on here. And this I don't need to make real shiny smooth. This will be one of the parts that stays relatively unfinished, but I don't want the finish to soak in. The most important thing is to get around the edge and not have a lip on there that'll keep this piece in the mold. I need to build a little radius around there. Anyway, the whole purpose of this, again, this is not going to be in the final part. It's just to make pulling the part out a little easier. Try to make a taper piece up here. And again, probably could get away without this, but it would just be easier to release with this little taper piece. Remember, all the draft angles need to go so that it's bigger at the bottom than it is at the top. I forgot which way this goes. Yeah, I just need, that should be fine. Now, as long as we have a little time left today, what we're going to do, I'm going to take the little piece that goes on the back of the fuselage, which we're going to mold anyway, and just do the same exact thing I've done to this, put a finish of CA on it, and lay it out on a base plate, and make a little draft piece for both ends. Kind of redundant, no point going over and over that, but so by the end of the day I should have two pieces ready to load up with Brodak primer here. Okay, I got both of these pieces ready. Now the final thing is to sand all around the corners and edges and get that prepared for a coat of Brodak white primer. Now the last thing after this is all sanded out, wipe it all down with M600, let it dry, and we'll get some white Brodak primer on there. Again, that CA base and the Brodak primer. In the past, I've gotten some real good results with the soft molds. This will give me a chance to see if this is going to be appropriate on a hard mold. Now, because we're going to sand this down, and because it's raining, two reasons. We don't have any need to spray it. This is all going to get sanded down. Sure, we're going to get 4 or 5 coats on this before it's done. We'll let one dry overnight, see how many imperfections we can pick up. And we'll probably come back and work on this tomorrow. Again, the Brodak white primer is a real nice base. Sands and buffs easily. For what we're doing, it's just a real good choice. Then we'll let that dry overnight. We'll be back working on this tomorrow. Now this morning it looks like this primer is dried up overnight. I have to be real careful to seal, so I put some CA in that edge there because I don't want the epoxy when I actually make this to go underneath. I'll take some M600, some 600 paper and just rough this out. Usually this primer just sands like butter. As soon as I see the wood coming through, I have to stop. This will not be a long, labor-intensive thing here. We just want to get a relatively smooth surface to work off, including the base plate. The trick is keep the sandpaper flooded, keep everything clean. Don't let it get dry. You see, as soon as that comes through, that pretty much means that's all we're going to be able to sand it. I want to get that edge. That edge is going to be a critical thing to getting a nice finished product in a mold. You can see how nice the Brodak primer sands out, and that's why I've had like a really good experiences with it doing molds, especially on the little BELLCRANKs and stuff. Anyway, whenever you mold a part, or if you get into molding and you want to try it, it's always best to try small parts first. Larry Cunningham's been molding up some BELLCRANKs. Good to start with small parts before you dive into something big. That's why I wanted to lay these parts up with this mold making technique before I go and lay up that whole big giant fuselage shell. It's real handy. These are rubber, I call them sanding frogs. They're polywogs or tadpoles or something. But I need to get this edge cleaned up in here. And this is good whether you're making a mold or making a final model. This whole combination of shapes can really work to your advantage to get a nice clean edge line here, or a hinge line, or whatever kind of line you're looking at. Now when I'm all done with this, I'm going to spray on one more coat. I really don't need that last coat, but I just want these parts to be exceptionally nicely finished. Even though we're going to sand it, we're not going to use like the method where when it comes out of the mold you just go and paint it. We're going to have to sand it and everything anyway, but these are real handy tools. If you've never used these before, boy, these are the cat's meow. Well, I'm trying like heck to beat the raindrops here. Now obviously, you know, one coat would probably be enough for a mold. We're going to sand this part anyway to get the finish to it here. Well, here comes the rain. Well, you just can't win. I want to hurry this up. It's amazing the kind of luck you have around here with the weather. An excellent material. Very easy to sand wet, difficult to sand dry. You always want to plan around the idea that whenever you're going to use this, you're going to sand it wet. Can you believe this? It's raining. Unbelievable. It'll have to dry overnight, of course. We'll come back and work on this tomorrow. Now, well, while we're waiting for that primer to dry, progress report on Bill Hummel's copy of the Valkyrie. Now, he sent this really neat note asking me if I'll fly it in the spring. Fly it, I'll take it home with me. Anyway, he sent a couple of pictures, all Brodak dope, of course. Looks like he's well on the way to having it become a plane, and we were talking about the various trim schemes that Harold's planes were. Anyway, he's also got a Charlie Parrott Thunderbolt, kind of a semi-scale Thunderbolt, one of the planes I've always really liked. Of course, a picture of Noel Drindax, and Noel Drindax working on another one. He really likes this design, having good luck with his PA-61, of course. And we may be making a special carbon muffler for that plane, that's for sure. I really am looking forward to seeing that Valkyrie, Bill. And Bill, I hope when you're done you can add your name to the list of people that have built a Valkyrie, hey, including myself. Anyway, thanks for the photos. We're going to get back to work in the shop here. All that mold is drying. One of the things I'm totally surprised about, I'm shocked, is how popular these forked end bell cranks have become. I guess the internet realistically is more to do with that than anything else, but I've come across a real nice way of putting the ends on now with lock nuts, screws with exactly the right shoulder, and we buy them by the box so they have exactly the right shoulder. Get these from Micro Fasteners, and it really makes putting one of these together a piece of cake, even if you do it yourself. I'm done soldering the wire on one of these. What I always try to make sure is, this is always my test before I even put the lead outs on. Make sure I have absolutely zero friction in that bell crank. And that's the key. The whole key to making this work is that the material itself is a bearing material. That's what makes this whole thing possible. No little bushings or anything. Now, one of the other things is the screws have these screws that came from Micro Fasteners have exactly the right shoulder. Now, it only took me about, I bought out every hobby shop in the area because I couldn't get the right screws. It was really getting ridiculous. And one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure this was as practical as possible. Now, a couple little things I've learned, even if you already have one of these bell cranks, when I install this, you'll see what I do. As soon as that nut starts to catch, now I always like to leave, well, that's a little bit too much. I'm trying to overdo it here, but I always like to leave a quarter of a turn or so loose here so that this isn't pressing down, and I do the last little tightening. Now keep in mind, these are meant to be in an aeroplane reversed with the push rod facing the pilot. But it's the kind of idea you wonder why nobody thought of this sooner, including me. And I always leave that last little thread just a little bit boogered up. And these are pretty much ready when I'm all done, ready to put in a package. And again, we have these in two separate planes now that we're using on a regular basis. And I'm assuming these are going to sell even better in the future. Now you might be thinking, what's Miss Ashley doing with a bow maker? Well, Karen's learning how to make bows to decorate for Christmas.
Not learning.
Not learning.
I've done this.
Been there, done that.
You bet.
Look, she just right over my plans. I don't believe this. Anyway, this is the routine. Wendy makes wheel pants. Karen makes bows. We'll see what these look like when you're done. It's on our website now. Yeah. Bows by Karen. Oh, they are nice. How's that machine work? Look at this. This is the Pro Stunt Bow Maker. Ken Clapson invented this. This is a Ken Clapson invention. Amazing. Amazing. We're going to have bows all over the house here. Pretty cool. We got to find a way to sell these on the internet.
No way.
Carbon fiber bows. That's what we need.
Way.
Okay, just looking this over real carefully to see that we don't have any pinholes or edges or anything. In other words, one of the things that could be a tentative problem here as I look at it, if this lip didn't have, everything has to have a positive angle, like a cork going into a bottle. It always has to be that you can take it out, that it can't be a reverse cork or it would not come out of the mold easily. So we're trying to engineer that in as part of what we're doing here. It looks like that's dried, and since it's dried overnight, the next step on this is going to be to polish it up. 1200 sandpaper and Gorhams as the first step. Wax it. I'm thinking probably 4 coats will be enough. And we'll put the PVA on and we'll be ready to lay up our mold. Now the idea here is I don't want to sand through the part. Keep the sandpaper wet. I want to just impart a smooth finish. I'm not looking to remove any material, and if I sand through and the wood is sticking up, I'm going to have to go back and refinish it. So this is just a real minimum amount of sanding, maybe 10-15 minutes for the whole thing. But you can see, even if you look real close, you can see what a nice finish. Rodak primer leaves a beautiful finish on. Trick, as always, is to keep everything soaking wet. Sandpaper and the part. And I even want to get some of this a little smooth because that's going to be where we're going to be trying to pull up our part from. And the smoother we make it, the less chance there is that it'll stick in a mold or destroy the mold as we pull it apart. Again, this is going to be the first real full-size hard mold. So keep in mind, if it doesn't work the first time, obviously we're going to punt. But what happens with any modeling, molding kind of skill, each one, you should use like building blocks so that each one gets just a little bit better. Now once I'm done with this, and I dry it out, just get the M600 off of it. Now it's got a satiny dull finish. And of course, I've never found it. If it's out there, somebody's got to show it to me. Good old Gorhams. It even works on Rodak primer. And you can see, that's why I'm leaving the camera on, just about how much time I'm putting into this. Now, if you were making a profile or something, just this buffed out primer wouldn't even be a bad finish. Just thinking out. If you were looking to make a quick finish on a profile fuselage or on a wheel pant or on something, seal it with CA. Keep in mind it's not going to be as light as an all dope finish, so maybe a cowling, a small part. But give you an idea how quickly this buffs up. That's going to be perfect just like that. That's all the time I'll need to put in it. I'll put run the other piece off camera. I don't know if you can get some idea how nice and shiny that is. I tell you, that's really funny, and it's so true. Hasn't happened to me yet, but there's a good chance it will. I remember working in Lou Dudka's cellar one day, and Lou was putting on a super finish, wet sanding out the clear, whatever. He was in the final stages of finish. And I looked over at Lou, and Lou worked in an office, and he had these fingernails like 1/4 of an inch longer than, well, longer than mine anyway. So anyway, I'm looking at these and I'm saying, oh man, that's like real dangerous. And I mentioned it to him. He said, what do you know, Arnowski, you? You know, and we were good friends, but we were really rivals too. And we always wanted to, you know, like outfinish each other and everything, or build or whatever. Anyway, about a week later, I heard a story from Glenn Metter that Lou was sanding a plane and caught a fingernail under his buffed out finish. And he went absolutely berserk, wild, cursed me out, took my picture off the wall, stepped on it, stomped on it. But I always leave, and you notice if you look, my fingernails are always really sharp. Every morning before I start, when I'm working on a mold like this or on a finished part, I don't want to take any chance. It's hard enough to make it perfect as it is, but you catch a fingernail or some kind of jewelry, some kind of wedding ring or something on that, oh man. Anyway, we're about ready. Just thought I'd share that little story. We're about ready here. I'm about ready. Get our first coat of part-all wax on here. Now, usually, good molding procedure is that they get 4 coats of wax. Now, see, here's what's funny, too. If you worked in industry, in the molding industry, you're a professional molder, well, you'd know all this stuff. When you're a hobbyist, you got to kind of find it out, or you got to invent it, or you got to watch videos, or I don't know what. I've had to learn this trade the hard way. What I really should have done if I really had any brains was go get a job in a molding shop for a year, work for free, and learn the whole trade. But knowing me, and I have to do everything the hard way. I had to invent this as I went along. But it looks like, well, so far there's some future in it. We'll find out. The next material we need is a paste wax called part-all. It's like a high-quality carnauba wax. And this acts as a kind of a sealing agent, polishing agent, combination of things. And then they'll be ready for the PVA. And if you, actually this is wax you can use, Dennis Toth uses it to wax his plane with. It's actually just a good high-quality carnauba wax. Now, some of the videos that I've watched that professional mold makers have used, the technique they use is to put 1 coat on every hour, buff it off. I'm going to put plenty of this on. Because if, for instance, this part doesn't release, well, basically we're going to have to make this plug over or something really awful. So I will spend the rest of today, it'll be an hour a coat, polish each coat real well, just like you would polish your car. By the way, this does work good on planes. I remember using this on Spitfires and stuff. But it really leaves, when you're done, now keep in mind, this is primer, this is not paint. You try getting a good shine on auto primer, you've got something. Anyway, that's really, doesn't take long. That's even the first coat there. I don't know if you can see the shine on the first coat. What happens is as you get the 3rd and 4th coat on, it gets shinier and shinier and smoother. And every time you're polishing this, you're increasing the odds in your favor that the part will release with a smooth, non-destructive release on the first shot. So, the stuff even smells nice. Now remember, we're polishing in essence here every part that ever will come out of this mold all at once, assuming we get a mold out of this. Anyway, because I'm experimenting, you notice that I've started with the smaller parts first, rather than try something like the whole half fuselage shell. And because the material is about $97 a yard that we're going to be using to lay this up, and we need probably $200 worth of material to lay a fuselage shell up altogether, I don't want to just go experimenting. We'll experiment with some E-glass first, just to make sure the mold. And by the way, each time you use a mold, when a mold is new, they call it green, because it's still got microscopic little pores in it. Once it's released 5-10 parts, it shears off at a molecular level all those little parts, like our landing gear mold, and then it releases almost perfectly every time, once it passes through the green stage. Now look at this picture in today's mail, real close. This is from John Grisby. He's making profile gear. Well, we started making a mold for these, and what happened is we just had too many projects. The mold is still sitting in Jimmy's cellar. But since he's already making them, and he already has the mold made, I'm going to call up and order a couple of these and see if I can help him figure out some improvement or buy his material cheaper. He's using bleeder cloth. I don't know if he has a piece of Teflon around that. We certainly can get him a piece of Teflon if he'd like. But it certainly looks like he's got the right idea for doing this. He also sent a little picture. He flies RC, of course, but he's also been at the Nats and several times shared his Nats footage with me. I'm going to put his address up here on the bulletin board, so to speak. Well, one of the things about John, he shares what he has, and I hope, you know, that I'm going to send him a copy of this video, that he'll send us some, if he figures out any little tricks or tips on making his products, he'll share them with me. And that's one of the things that's happened since the internet has gone into, my involvement with the internet has been just all positive. Remember, in every other event except our event, molded carbon fuselages and molded parts and are just the standard of the industry. We're the only ones not. All right, we have 4 coats of wax on here, and boy, I'll tell you, that really did polish up nicely. Really impressed with the way that worked out. The next step on this is going to be, and I'm trying to decide exactly how I want to do this, I want to put on the wheel pant mold, I use 2 coats of, well, PVA is a common material. I use 2 coats, and it usually is a little shiny, and that results in a real nice finish on the mold for the carbon gear. But what I want to try to do here is I'm going to put 4 coats on. They recommend 4 coats on a new mold, so maybe I should just play it safe. And I can brush that on 1 coat at a time. I want to get plenty on the base plate too, because I want to be able to pull this off. I don't want it to stick. PVA is a water-soluble release agent that typically gives a nice clean release. I've used it on the gear mold for years. Other projects that require this type of release agent. You could spray it on. In our case, we're not worried about it because we're going to sand the part so we get a bond to paint anyway. And certainly, we're going to play it safe and put 4 coats on ultimately here. Again, it's a light green liquid. Doesn't smell. Even ask Karen. But it's water soluble too, so in essence you could soak the part in water and it would tend to release also. The thing here is to kind of babysit it and not get any runs in it. 4 nice thin coats. Let that dry. Usually in this temperature, shop conditions, it takes about an hour or so to dry each coat. And that will be, hopefully, playing it safe. What's the shape of the mold? Notice I put newspaper right underneath it, so if any drips out, either while we're doing a layup or the PVA, I don't want to have that stain the rug. My beautiful rugs here, they're in pretty sad shape to begin with. No sense making them any worse, that's for sure. Now in today's mail, haven't heard from this fellow in a long time, Jim Varno. He's from Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. And years ago he was a regular, I guess is the right. It's not like we're talking about drug addicts or something, irregular. Anyway, this is his version of, I guess, a cardinal. I don't know. I can't really tell if he's made major changes, minor, or none at all. It looks like he's built it from a cardinal kit. The letter doesn't exactly say. And I always love when you haven't heard from somebody or seen them in a long time to see that they're back interested in the hobby. Wow. This looks like a beauty, by the way. Now, it just turns out we're thinking of something very similar to this paint work for Miss Ashley, where they kind of a Strega thing comes in, I haven't really decided on that. Obviously, we need to spruce up that wing. We can't just have a red flat wing. Do something, and we're not making a scale model anyway. By the way, Jim, a nice carbon gear would be a great addition to your Air Force here. I'm going to take a wild guess and guess that it's a Super Tiger 60 here. And I'll tell you, I love that nose section. The Cardinal looks like a speed ship kind of nose section. Believe it or not, it cost me about $50 a year to sponsor this, to send people out these decals that say "Thanks, Windy." Anyway, it looks like, give me a little food for thought here on some paint work for Miss Ashley. Again, a nice set of photos. We'll pass these on to Tom Morris. See if he'll be gracious enough to publish some of them. Like this. Look at the size of this block of foam he's got. His parts outside drying. Looks like he did the Windy method with the whoever method it really is, with the flaps and elevators not attached. Anyway, from Jim Varno. And Jim, I'm really glad to hear you're back, and hope we're going to get to hear from you more often. And one thing nice about having access to the internet and having a website that's linked to a lot of real high-tech places. Paul Winter downloaded this for me, and there's all kinds of cute little material and things, all technical things out on their website. And I'm just going to put this up real quick because anybody's really interested in this can just look at the website or contact them or the email. This is a nice little piece of information to add to your collection of catalogs, and everybody knows I love to save catalogs. Paul Winter also sent something I've never seen. This is sticky back sandpaper. I'm going to have to try some of this. Wish I had some fingernails to do with this. Anyway, besides the point, the back peels off. We'll be trying this in the near future. It takes calluses off anyway. This looks like a little rougher grit. Yeah, you can see it takes skin right off, that's for sure. Ooh, nice if you want to clean your cuticles up. Anyway, Paul, I appreciate this, but this is the cool... Oh, I'm looking at the wrong side of it. Bong. This always gets my full interest. And Paul, I have to tell you, if you keep feeding me these magazines, we'll be friends for life. Oh, Reno 99 races. Whoop. Turn to the Reno Air Races. How cool is this? Paul, I really appreciate these magazines. Keep them coming. Let me just look through these pictures real quick. I'll run these right through for the people that don't have the magazine sitting in their lap. Believe it or not, this is one of the models that I hope I live long enough to make a replica of. Obviously, we will not be able to make floats. Some real big long wheel pants would be cool, but this was the original Maki Castoldi MC72 that had two engines, and if you notice, there's two V12s in there, contra-rotating props, a real piece. This, to me, is the style of it, I think, just, like a Tucker Special, I guess, the rear set cockpit, one of the things I've always liked. Maybe coming up in a couple of years, maybe next year, who knows. Now, when I was in England with Roger Lads, I stood right underneath this and took video. And so far, we've not been able to convert the video thanks to the wonderful conversion techniques that they have in both England and here. But we have some video of this. We got special permission. Roger Ladd's new to museum curator, and we got to sit right up in here at the belly of the beast and everything. And if you think you've heard the wildest sound I've ever heard is 4 Merlins all running together. Oh, in synchronization. Unbelievable. Anyway, every Reno Air Racer is a beauty. I don't care what model it is. And this magazine is real. I'll put the address of this magazine. Anybody wants to subscribe to it. This is a great magazine. That is a nice shot. Oh, man. Unbelievable. I don't know why I love this stuff, but I really do. The exhaust stains coming out the side. Anyway, this is a magazine I guess a lot of Reno aficionados would want to keep forever. Triumph and Tragedy at Reno. We all know what the tragedy is. Ill-fated Levitt's Rogers racer combined with a modified North American P-51 fuselage with the wings and tails from a Learjet 23. Propeller seal problems early in the qualifying covered the cowling and windscreen in oil, making visibility difficult for Levitt's. I'll tell you another thing. This is really cool. The book that Dennis Toth loaned me, and I've been reading it every day at lunchtime, a couple of chapters. Just read the chapter about Lyle Sheldon, and the first of his planes that was, and this is it, of course, the rare bit, the only plane he's ever owned. The first one he had sponsored. That's a long story, but to sum it up, he had some prostitutes help sponsor it, and you got to read the book. It's right in the first couple of chapters. Great book. Ken Tyser here coming in for a landing in Dago Red. This is a great mag. Paul, you are okay. Al Rabe, I'm sure if Al Rabe gets to see this, this will be wet as whistle. How can you not like this stuff? I don't know. I don't know how people can, like, just say, Reno Air Racer, so what? Now, Paul, if you're thinking about doing a tsunami with this paint job, I think you'll be doing just fine. That is a very conservative English British paint job. What, Banjack, eat your heart out here. And who might this be? Look at a nice paint job on old number 7, old Strager. He's got himself a new paint job. These planes typically get painted quite often. Another thing that's always been a big thing I've been interested in is the early seaplanes and development right up to the Schneider Cup racers. I've always found that interesting. An interesting chapter in aviation. And I love that Castaldi. Oh. Some nice props, hand carved. Also some of this nice aviation art. Hey Paul, you know Christmas is coming? How about a nice poster like this? You can get these in England real cheap for my Spitfire bedroom. Thanks a lot for the information, and we're going to get back to the shop. Great book. Here's the deal. If you want one of these magazines or you want to subscribe, hey, worldwide. PC Magazine Limited, P.O. Box 272, Haywards Heath, West Sussex, RH163FS, UK. Excellent magazine. All the resin we're going to be using to make this tool comes from George Spar, George and Barbara Spar of Aerospace Composites. This is his phone number. George is his son was a former junior control line champion. One of the people I helped early on, I think when he was about 15 or 16 years old. Anyway, his wife Barbara and George run this business, and they're extremely helpful with these type of composite products. Because we have two parts of this, what I thought would be, and because this is the first time I'm going to be trying to make a mold from these materials, I have the smaller of two parts, and I'm going to lay the smaller part up first. Now the way George's system works, and again keep in mind this is the first time we're using it, so if there's a problem I'm going to need to iron it out, and I have his tech support to help me. What I'm going to be doing is this has 4 coats of PVA on it. You can see it's kind of shiny, not real shiny, but it does have a rather smooth surface. We're going to be taking the first of the resins, which is labeled gel coat, surface coat, mixing it with a grain scale and painting on a coat, giving it time to get to where it's at least hard, or at least that you can put your fingernail in it and it's beyond the state where it runs and moves away. And we're going to be laying in some cloth, some thin cloth first with a different resin. The other resin is a higher strength resin. Gel coat typically has almost no strength. very little strength. It's all full of fillers, but it does pick up a nice surface. Then when we do put the second and third and fourth coat of cloth on here, we'll just use up scraps of cloth and build this up until, in essence, it's a little bathtub. And then the next day, 24 hours later, what the mold maker's delight is when you go to take it off and it doesn't come off, or that you've somehow made yourself a problem. Now, the reason I have liked and used molding rubber in the past, yeah, if we made a little box now and made this piece for molding rubber, guaranteed it would come out without ruining the mold and without ruining the plug. But the problem is it gets very, very expensive. To make a 42-inch mold would probably be a couple $100 just in rubber. So this is going to give us one other bullet in the gun, one other weapon in our arsenal. If this works, then we'll lay up the bigger of the two pieces once we see how this is working. And then obviously the third part, assuming by then we have all the kinks worked out, the third part will be the whole base of the fuselage, to which these two pieces ultimately will bolt to the bottom. And that's what we're going to try to do in this video. I mean, when I tell you this stuff might look easy on video, it's at least difficult for a person of my skill level. What I originally tried to do, and I had spoken to several other people who thought the best way to do this would be to just make the parting line. Make this, in essence, if we looked at this from the front, it would look like this. And that this would be our two shells would be coming together. And I would have to, of course, fabricate some kind of a little lip on one side so that I had kind of a furniture joint. Well, the original way that I had envisioned this part, that looked like it was going to be fine. Now, it hasn't turned out that way. As I've gone along, by making this wing come out, I don't see any reason not to make this whole thing in one piece. And then, of course, the cowling. This is the third piece. Let me just make so that it's kind of clear what I'm trying to do. This piece will be angled. So what, in essence, I'm trying to do is make this whole thing in one piece. That this would be piece one. And believe me, this was a lot of thinking to figure out how to do this. This, you know, now that it's done, of course, I'm sure everybody's going to say, oh yeah, that's the way I would have did it too. But to make this little piece removable, and in my mind, this was the thing that might or might not make this a practical thing, is being able to make this all in one piece, which is the piece that we're going to cast up right now, or lay up, however you want to call it. But again, a lot of thought went into this. And this is not the way they build RC fuselages. I had to kind of invent this as I went along. And it's evolved, just like this phone call is going to evolve. President Nixon! Now basically this same technology would work even if we were to glue the wing in, glue the tail in, and then glue these pieces on and leave a little cowling. But what happens with making a molded part that kind of you don't see in the very beginning, and then after you go to do it, you have to figure out. You have to lay out the sequence of parts of how you're going to do it. In other words, the first thing you would normally have to do is make this part, because this part then sets this part up in motion, and it's what happens is now all these lines have to be an exact match if you want to maximize the effort that you're putting into it. These have to match. So by making this part first, making the plug, now from this piece we can make this piece, which we haven't even started yet, which will be the plug for this piece. But it's the chicken and the egg, which came first. Now we also have other choices here. In the back, we want to make sure these two lines have to match up. So when we go to make the plug for the fuselage, we'll have these parts already made, and then we can carve and sand into this piece. And of course the nicest thing, we already have the top shell. This part's already been molded in balsa wood. So it's kind of a sequential thing, and even though once it's all done, you know, this really looks, and now that I look back, I think, gee whiz, this looks as easy as pie. But it was a lot of hard nights of thinking before I came up with how I wanted to do this. Now, knowing how you want to do something is only part of the equation. You got to be able to do it. I mean, I want to play baseball like Mickey Mantle. The second thing is I have to learn how to hit and pitch and everything. I'm also thinking of one other possibility, and because my little brain, anybody knows me, they know I think of this stuff day and night. I want to have basically a clear canopy that I'll paint with the correct piece. And I'm going to spend a lot of time doing canopy detail. Now, here's the problem. I'm going to be detailing the canopy, and I don't know which fuselage I'm going to use. So one of my thoughts was, and tell me if anybody has any, by the time you see this video, anybody has got of what, because we have take-apart construction, allow that somehow I can get in there and remove the canopy from the bottom, remove the cockpit details, all the little switches and everything. And I'm going to try to figure out how to do this. And so I hope somebody's going to come up with an idea, either through a hole in the fuselage or something. But a way that I could get in here, and once I take the wing out and take the blocks off, get in here, take 2 set screws out, and take my canopy out. Now, another thing that would be nice, I'd never have to make another canopy. Now, that would be nice, too. The whole idea of this is, in the end, to be able to reproduce planes without a lot of work. Now, among some of the other options, and you can see how much time and thought I've put into this, not that it's ever, see, all of these don't have to pan out. If I only can use half of the ideas, I'll be ahead of the game. It also, we just today got in our carbon material, and Dave Midgley is already carving up plugs for carbon fiber wings similar to Kaz Minato. Similar. Now, I don't want to do it the way Kaz does. I want to have the wing in one piece. But if this were to become a practical thing, and with Dave's help, I know the wings are a lot easier to make than the fuselages by a power of 10. Engineering up a wing is engineering up sheets and thicknesses and laminates. Making a fuselage, and I've also thought of possibly coming up with some idea for a carbon fiber motor mount crutch and molding the motor mount crutch out of carbon, and even letting it be that I could use it. I'm just running these ideas because I want to get feedback from people, that I could somehow make this piece up, molded one piece out of carbon, even to use in a wooden airplane. This could be made lighter. I could put hollow tubes in here, pieces of arrow shaft, say, so that these mounts were very light, and yet they were tubular and rigid. Anyway, these are just some of the ideas I'm mulling over in my mind, but the first thing I have to do is get out George's resin and see if this molding technique is going to work for me. And if it doesn't, I got to be prepared to spend a lot of money on molding rubber. Put this on the tape because this is one of the questions a lot of people ask me. If you're going to make a mold, let's say, of, whatever the part may be, and you want to mold a part, well, if the part has a very slight draft angle, and I mean slight, the odds are good you'll be able, and these parts here have a very slight draft angle, you'll be able to release the part. If, on the other hand, and if you want to make this part where it's bigger inside than on the other side, this is a good place to use molding rubber. Because molding rubber, you can just pull this part apart and pull a part out. And you can make a little box like we've made for the nobler cowling, the box method. But for our purposes, we're going to have to deal. A draft angle means that if this had no draft angle, it would be perfectly 90 degrees. And it would be difficult because you'd be shearing the part out. When it has a very slight, it's called a draft angle, very slight, it makes getting the part out a little bit easier. That's why at the end of these molds we've made these little pieces, only so that we can pull them out of the mold a little easier. This is typically called hard shell. And I'm learning this as I go along. I mean, I'm not trying to pawn myself off as some kind of world-class expert here, but the fact is I have molded more parts than anybody else I know in control line stunt. Probably in RC I wouldn't even be in the top 50, but I am trying to pioneer the way that if this does work and it is practical and we can make the planes, it opens the door to mass producing planes where the person using them would have very little construction time and hopefully bulletproof replaceable parts. And I hope that's really coming. That's the whole reason for that little part there, because otherwise we'd have a 90-degree piece and we'd be shearing that, pulling it out. Same thing up here, we've put that little angle back. Now, pioneering this stuff, I mean, the AMA has already recognized my pioneering efforts, and I'm very thankful for that, but I have to tell you, I think most of the inventions I'm going to invent are ahead of me, not behind me. And I think this is going to hopefully be one of them. Our wheel pants mold is running totally reliably every day, so is the carbon fiber gear, so we're ready to tackle a much bigger and more complex part. I use this little rack to lay out all my little carbon parts, but in the case of doing this, I want to cut all the material and the size ahead of time and use up as much of the scrap that I've already accumulated as possible. And I save all the scrap. Scrap works out well if you're going to make a mold. You can use it all up. So I've tried to cover as much of the world as possible in old newspaper here, even the floor, because for sure some of this will wind up dripping. As much newspaper around as possible. Now these are the resins that we're going to be using. You notice on each one of them it'll say how much resin and how much hardener, and the idea is you measure it with a grain scale. It's always in weight, not volume. So when you get the grain scale out and measure this, about an ounce, ounce and a half at a time. More than that and it'll kick off too quickly. The bigger of a batch of resin you mix, the quicker it kicks off from the heat that it generates. Notice it says surface coat. That means it's a gel coat and it's loaded with fillers. Make special scissors for cutting fiberglass if you want to be a big spender, but what I do is I just wear out ordinary scissors, pair after pair after pair. Okay, anyway, there's other ways of cutting cloth. This is 1/2 ounce cloth, and we're going to use a lot of this. This is some of the scraps that I have from doing other jobs. I just want to cut scraps large enough that they'll go over the mold and then out onto the piece about by an inch. Yeah, if it's a little bit too big, it's not a problem either. I just want to make sure it's big enough. On the first layers that are going to go over the gel coat, I want to have as few seams as possible. So I want to cut all the material I'm going to use ahead of time. And this is one of the things, because these cans and hardeners all start to look alike, I can identify them with tape that these two kind of marry together when I do the mixing. Obviously the trick is to weigh the cup first. The cup empty is 2 grams and 3/4. Then meter this out in the ratios that this calls for, and try not to mix more than about an ounce at a time. Another great little trick is have 2 separate spoons, because believe me, if you take 1 drop of that hardener and put it in this quart can, or just dip the spoon in, you know what'll happen. You, at some future time, will have a can of hardened resin. 1 drop of hardener will cure a 50-gallon drum of resin if you let it. Now you can see gel coat. It's full of thickening agents. That's why it really has a minimum amount of strength. You wouldn't want to make a wing spar or a landing gear out of gel coat. Gel coat is just to make a nice shiny surface. When you look at a boat and you see that nice shiny surface, it's gel coat. What they do though is they back it up with structural resin. So anyway, let's get an idea. I don't know how much of this we're going to need to mix. But I like to work in amounts that are smaller than necessary. And then I need to just obviously calculate out 10%. That's even I can do that, guys. We know we got to deduct 1.5. So it looks like we have 50. Means we're going to need just a tad less than 5 on the hardener. Ways you can do this is I set the scale to what I know is going to be the amount of hardener I want. And when the scale starts to pull up, and I can go in here real easily, slowly and easily. Some of these resins are real, whoa, you really want to keep the mix ratios accurate. What we're looking for is a 10-to-1. Some of the pipe resins are 10-to-1. And they get their maximum efficiency when they're there it goes. Now I know from here it's about 2 drops away. It's funny, and I'll tell this honestly and truly. You could actually see it on video. When I made the first of the 5-blade mold props, what I did was, now the trick of course is to mix, and after you think it's mixed, mix for 2 minutes more. And I'll do that off camera, but I'll tell this real quick story here. I didn't realize in the beginning of learning how to use polyester resin, you can't mix big amounts, that it actually will catch fire and burn, and so will epoxy. Well, I didn't know that. I got a gallon can of this black tooling resin, and I said, oh man, I'm gonna pour this mold. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, man, why don't people pour molds all the time? It'd be so easy just to pour it. I poured it. By the time I got back downstairs with a cup of coffee, I had flaming embers. I ran through it outside in the snow. It had to be. Smoke was everywhere. Smoke alarms were going off. Actually, this doesn't have too bad of an odor. The other one says it's kind of odor-free, but typically gel coat stinks. It always has some, I don't know what the chemical composition that it has a rancid odor. Again, I want to eliminate air bubbles, or I don't want to use a blender or anything. This is one of the key things, is once you think this is mixed, get that consistency right, mix it another 2 minutes. And I'm going to do that off camera, no sense in, I'm sure you're getting bored watching me do this already. You can get the idea here. I'm doing one little area at a time, making sure I try to do it in a manner that gives me the minimum amount of air bubbles, or even better, no air bubbles at all. This material seems to handle a lot nicer than the polyester resin that I've used. I want to create a little ridge along here also. Have about a half-hour work time, open time with this material. Trick is to get, the only thing we care about is that we don't have a defect right on what will be the mold surface. Now obviously, whoops, put that there. I've noticed if you go too fast with this, that's when you get a bubble. And from this point on, it won't matter if there's a bubble, but we'd like to have that surface up against the mold. Let's hope anyway. Listen, you gotta hope for some luck in life anyway. Again, if you go too fast, you wind up making air bubbles. In fact, I can see that. Looks like I've mixed almost enough. I'm probably going to run out right at the very end, on the other end of the mold. Obviously, you want to keep newspaper on the rugs. My very expensive 12-year-old rugs here. Fuel stained, oil stained. Anyway, I'm kind of excited because once this part comes off and I realize I can use it, I can go ahead and make the plug for the actual fuselage. This is the only piece holding me back right now. This will have to dry 24 hours. Another thing I've learned is never wash brushes with epoxy. These brushes are really, just throw them away. You try to use them and there's always little chunks of epoxy floating into your new mold. Yeah, I'm going to have to make another mix here. I'm running out. I didn't mix enough. I thought an ounce, well, an ounce. 50 grams would be enough, not really. Looks like I will have to mix some more. But I want to get as thick a coat, and you can see. I'm going to show this up close, how this material lays down and imparts a really shiny surface, which is what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to look like a boat when it's done. going to mix. Even though it's very tempting to try to use this last little bit and use the cup over and everything, just forget about it. Use all new stuff. Otherwise, the stuff that's in here has already started to cure and harden, and you've got a mismatch of, it kills your curing time. So another thing that can happen, if you're not real careful here, if you're using the old cup and you go stick the spoon in it and it touches something with the hardener and then you go back into the can, you just threw away $100 worth of resin is what's happened, what's going to happen to you. There's some professional mold maker that's been in molding school all his life and doing this and looking at my crude attempts here and thinking, well, you know what, you're right. Actually, there is a molding school that's smooth on holes, and it's $300 for a weekend. I certainly would consider that. You want to kind of wait a minute or two, or if we had a vacuum, we could pull a vacuum on this and get rid of those bubbles. We just let them sit. Now once those air bubbles are gone, I can brush this on. And again, I'm going to have to wait. Usually, the suggested time is a half an hour. I don't know if that's going to really, but it's got to be that I can't put my fingernail in this before I lay up the next layer, and that's the tooling resin. That's the resin that'll add strength to the mold. This is going to add the finish. The other resin adds the strength. Again, just a little, this part of it is the part that, you know, I got frustrated in the very beginning. I didn't realize there was tooling resin and gel coat. I'd be using what amounted to be ordinary resin. I got a little speck of junk in here. And I'd pull a mold and its surface would be terrible. I'd say, what the hell is this? How do these people do this? So, of course, you call a bunch of people up, and some of them help a little less, and some of them don't help at all. But I've located enough people in the hobby and outside the hobby now that I'm ready to build a B-2 bomber. And I hope that people understand. I hope there's no misunderstanding here. If this doesn't work on the first try, or if the molds break, or if the motor flies out of the plane, it's the only way you know if this stuff, you're never going to make progress if you don't do this. You have to be willing to open yourself up for some ridicule, which in my case, I get the ridicule even when stuff works, so like it doesn't even matter. Okay, we're just going to wait now until that tacks out. As this is drying, I kind of have this little blob here. I can tell now it's turning to string right now. You see how that's turning to string? So I know I'm at the end of the time that this epoxy, it almost will stand up on its own end here. I know I'm about 15 minutes from now. And what I do is I keep the shop conditions cold while I'm laying this all up, because it gives me extra time to lay it on. And then as soon as it's in this position, I crank the heat up to 70 degrees. So now, within 10-15 minutes, that'll be ready to lay the next coat on. Now I'm mixing this up. This is the actual resin that's going to lay the cloth in place. This is 15 to 100. Again, using the same method, pre-mixing it out, pre-counting it out. Just waiting for that scale to go up. Now the original gel coat we laid on there is just like chewing gum that's been sitting on the side, there it goes, sitting on the sidewalk for a while, just nice and sticky, and we can lay this. It's a laminating resin. That means it's meant to be put in layers, kind of glocky. Now because I mixed and ran out the first time, I mixed a little more. I mixed 100 grains this time. And I'll do the mixing here and just start laying the lightest cloth in, and then the next heaviest, and then finish it off with the heaviest. You can't peel the brush up off the table. It's kind of, when it comes up, it's almost like string here. Let me show this up. That's ready for the next coat. Now I'm just putting on a nice slobbery, jello-y coat of this. Make sure it comes out at least a ½ an inch. Now I remember doing this with polyester resin, and what a mess. This was smelly. Whew. you could die from the smell. This has an odor, but it's certainly not odor free, but it's not, you know, the kind of odor your wife has you assassinated for either. And if my wife has let me live this long, wow. Now the trick is in this layer, I'd like to get as few wrinkles in this as possible. We don't need to press this down, I just want to make sure it's saturated. I'm using the lightest cloth first so it clings in any of the corners or angles or edges. That's really overkill in a mold like this. It's not going to be a problem. I'll put the heavier stuff, and then I'll use up in a final layer, just use up all my scraps. The thing I learned is to always pull the edges out, and this takes and puts a little bit of tension. You can see the cloth moving. Pulls it down with just a little bit of tension, but doesn't smash it down. And as I add each layer, I'm going to put 8 layers, 4 layers of the real light and 4 layers of medium on this piece. I have about a half-hour working time. Obviously, I'm not going to put this whole thing on tape, but you notice how that flows out nice. And as soon as that's flowed out, we're ready for the next coat. And we go through the same thing again. Just kind of pulls it down. Whoop, look at that, I stuck my finger right in it. You believe that? Never a problem. Since we're still in gel, that'll seal it up. You'll never even know that. Famous last words. I can hear people right now going, ah, he stuck his finger in a hole there. Dope. That's how I feel too. Dopey. Usually it only happens when you're on camera. So other people would go back and rewind that and say, oh, yeah, put the white gloves on, be doing this. I watched a video from a composite company that I will not mention, where they had a woman doing this with a white smock on and gloves, and I mean, it was just the most aerospace looking thing. And I'm thinking, yo, my God, it would ruin my whole image to do that. Okay, but you get the idea now. We're just going to lay 8 of these layers in, one right after another. In each one, just make sure there's plenty of... The cloth is only acting to build up some thickness and rigidity. Pull each one out. Notice I'm doing the smaller of the 2 parts first. Always better to work on a small part before a big part. Now we'll see if that glob that I just put my finger in, if that's going to come out in the final mold. And I'm going to just put the rest of these in and then start working on the big one off camera.
Working in a candy store. After the first day, you never bother with the candy. But oh, that first day, oh.
I'm trying to get each layer to just lay down. Always pulling from the middle toward the edges. Puts just a little bit of tension on it.
Why the people love the guy with the big nose? It's because the guy with the big nose has a heart for matching. Yesterday they told you you would not go far. That night you opened and
I can see one thing would be a little bit of a help would be having a bigger brush. Little things you learn the first time you do a mold this size. Get a bigger brush. So you don't think I'm dumb. I wound up getting a bigger brush. See, these are the little things you have to know. Have a big brush ready if you're gonna do this. Now wherever this curve comes, I want to pull the resin back so that we don't get a bubble there. I want to get that edge as nice as possible. And from this point on, it's just laying in. I think there's 4 or 5 layers left to go on here. But I guess there's a similarity between molding and modeling in the fact that each mold you make, you build toward the next one, and you pretty much know ahead of time what you can and cannot do or what's practical. And you don't put your fingers in as much. Like I just put my finger in here before. I go out today, I'm waiting for that mold to cure. I get this envelope from Fred Cronwet. I hope I'm saying it right, Cronenwet. Fred, if I'm saying your name wrong, I'm sorry. Look at the pictures. Now, I'll put these up on the tape, maybe sometime later on in the tape. Wow, are these I will never have to wallpaper my shop again. These are unbelievable. These are so good. Now, obviously, Fred's a professional photographer. I guess that's the right. Boy, oh boy. Now, there's some interesting things I've picked up I'll put this on the tapes later. Interesting things I've picked up, interesting angles like this one where the shadows, I can see the shadows on that shape. It'll help me model that shape. I can get the number one thing, the color. I can get the color real right. And since we're working with Randolph right now to develop the brightest red, and Bob Brookins is kind of helping us on that, having these color photos, boy, I'll tell you, Fred, you've outdone yourself. And there's 3 or 4 packs of them in here. I will work on putting these on later on. And sent along a set of Spitfire pictures. Oh, man. See, this is, you can laugh about this all you want, or you can come up with some, yeah, yada, 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 but this is what makes our hobby different than other things that I've been involved in, like motorcycle racing and like boat racing. You don't have this camaraderie, this exchange of information. And as if this wasn't enough, there's another tape from Al Rabe in today's, I haven't even looked at it yet. The main thing is I have to go work. I got my new resin. I have the new $97 a yard carbon to lay up a part with. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a test on my landing gear mold because I've never used this resin before. This is a brand new high-end, must be post-cured, very, very, usually the high-end resins get difficult to handle. So I'm going to do a little test with that first. Now this is the resin we're going to be testing and using. The first thing we're going to do, that mold is going to sit until I run a landing gear with this part. Then that'll give me a little feel for just how the material handles. All epoxies handle differently. Now, in this case, one of the unique features is this is much, much stronger of a resin than the resin we originally were using. And the resin we were originally using was much stronger than hobby resin, stuff that you buy that are aimed at hobby. This is not hobby-related stuff. This is really made only to be used by professionals. There's all kind of warnings. It needs to be post-cured. It absolutely needs to be post-cured. If you don't post-cure it, Dennis Choate has told me he's used this for a long time, and it will be very, very brittle. So before we lay up a fuselage part, this is one of the resins we want to try. We're going to lay up a landing gear with this and just get a feel for, we'll post-cure it and check on its brittleness, check on its strength, and then weigh it against one of the other ones that we've made with the other resin. And I have a feeling this one is going to be a lot stronger. Thing is, when you buy this resin, you buy these little pumps for $10, but they look a lot like the fuel pumps that I sell. Maybe they are the fuel pumps, who knows? But they're calibrated. So what you do is one stroke with each pump, and obviously you put the hardener in the hardener one. You really don't need this. This gets into the area of you don't need to really figure this out. They give you some little mini instructions, but most of all, this is the reason this is not appropriate in a hobby use. This is a little more toxic, a little more difficult to handle. It's not like 5-minute SIG epoxy where it has no odor and no. This stuff does have some side effects that you really wouldn't want to use in your house or something. And you sure wouldn't want to post-cure it in your kitchen oven or anything like that. So anyway, but this allows us to go to the next level up as far as making this composite fuselage and making it as strong as possible. And the cost, this is several times more expensive than the cheaper resin. Almost always you have to, the first couple times you pump these pumps, you need to get out the air. I found a good way to get around it is to do the first cycle real slow. You take a few air bubbles that way, but okay. And at the cost of this material, obviously you don't want to waste it. You know, that's got air. You're not pumping anything but air. Whoop! As I said, you want to do it slow. Okay. By the way, this does have a, you'd never use this by mistake, thinking it was odoriferous. My landing gear mold has made over 300 parts so far. And the way I keep track of the cycle count is by how many gallons of resin I've used and how many thousand feet of tow. And I'm on my third 1,000 foot roll of tow from George Spar. Now, same rules apply. The reason I wouldn't want to put either fillers or dye in the first run is this really is a test run, and I want to see how the liquid is. See, the liquid is very thin, and it may be that this is going to be a little more difficult to use because ultimately we're going to use vacuum bagging techniques, and the thin resin you're going to need, you want to squeeze out all the resin. Remember, what we're trying to do is achieve a balance of in the fun. Boy, this stuff does have an odor. The final weight of the product, that resin will be half of the weight, and that the material, and that sounds kind of easy, but believe me, you've got to squeeze out every drop of resin because the resin is a lot heavier than the carbon. We've laid these up on you know, video so many times. Just going to go through this and I'll show the finished part. I wouldn't guarantee that the first part is going to be flawless, because all of these parts then are then going to have to be oven cured, and I have a choice of two places I can do that. Out in my own garage I have a very limited oven, and then I have the real high-tech oven that I can control within 2 degrees over at the anodizing shop, which has now become our new machine shop facility, and we're already running parts over there. Jimmy's already got some of the machines set up, so we'll take a look at how this looks once it's all laid up. The material seems to handle beautifully. It's a much thinner resin, viscosity-wise, and that's my only concern, is that when the resin is real thin like this, you got to really brush everything out. And the brush out part of this, now I got to keep this in mind when I'm using that carbon. See, if I was using the other resin, but again, it's almost impossible to achieve. In fact, I think it's safe to say it is impossible to achieve the strength to weights that we're looking for on our fuselage parts and landing gear parts without some inconvenience in terms of using these high-tech, very expensive materials too. But this is real aircraft, you know, this is the material they make the B-2 bomber out of, so. This is the part that acts. Now, we're not going to vacuum bag this part, but in the future we are going to try to set up to do some vacuum bagging on landing gear. And this is it, is to squeeze out. This is what vacuum bagging actually does is, and you can see the resin just flowing right out of here. If you were to not do, well, hard to say. You probably could sit by the mold for 7 or 8 hours and keep squeezing it. That'd work, or 24 hours in the case of some resins. But again, as part of our learning experience, I would say right now this resin handles every bit as nice as, well, some of the easier ones like the ordinary West resin. But this one, anytime you. Now I'm also trying to check the time it goes into a cheese state, the open time it's called. Because, you know, I'm trying to learn a trade here. Keep in mind that probably professionals that serve an apprenticeship in a real factory like Boeing or something, they probably serve a couple of year apprenticeship. Difference is too, they get paid for it. I have to finance my own projects. I'm like, by the way, that Lyle Shelton book, that book, A Fly Low, Fly Fast, when they're talking about Lyle Shelton, how he financed the Rare Bear with prostitution money, I love it. I don't know if that's exactly what Karen would approve of, but hey, when you have an air racer, you know, you've got to look at all the resin that's already come out of here now. This is before we even put the Teflon sleeve on it. Now normally if this was, if customers would accept the fact that they didn't want that shiny surface, we could put a material over here that would allow more resin to bleed in, but you don't get that nice shiny surface then. Part of the job that I have to give Dave Midgley full credit for this. This is pretty exotic stuff, this sheet Teflon. And this is what gives it that nice, really, I call it professional, but it's probably a better word for it, smooth. Really nice. I can't wait to run through those Fred Cronwet photos. Wow, that guy is really a professional. It's hard to believe. By the way, he was at the field shooting photos when Miss Ashley crashed and Gary Levitz was killed. Look at that surface that you get with this. That's full credit goes to Dave Midgley. And you can even squeeze out more resin after you put this Teflon on, because it allows the trowel to just work its way down. Resin that's left over, what I'm going to do is go get a test piece of wood. In fact, let me get it right now. Just an ordinary block of wood. What I want to do is a test to see what kind of a surface I get when I attach using this as, say, a glassing medium. Now in the past we've used SIG glassing mediums that are, one tube is twice as big as the other, and that seemed to be the best, but now that we have post-curability, now obviously one of the problems we would have is we'd have to post-cure it. We'd have to be able to put, but because we have a take-apart planning and take the wing out, we can put the whole fuselage in, or prop, or whatever. Now it'll be an interesting little test to see if this is, let's get a piece of material, a little piece of crow's foot weave. Again, if you don't do these little tests, you might be cheating yourself out of having, in other words, the best possible anything. Another thing this resin might be real good for, and Frank McMillan is the one that's had the best luck, and Bill Werwidge, I think, with the that black carbon mat, attaching it to flaps and stuff, fuselages. Well, when I tried it, I had less than good luck, but I'd like to try using some of this resin maybe. Hey, see, it's always a building block. You're always learning and then trying to up the bar, learn, up the bar. And all the stuff we did with the basic resins, now that we're into the high-tech resins, at least we're comfortable using this, and we've worked out all our little kinks. Look how nice that comes out. Ooh. This, see, with any resin that's left over, that looks like it's going to work real well. Now we have all our molds curing here, our test curing, and by tomorrow we should be able to run a test piece out of the big fuselage part mold. Again, we've kind of put this right under a heating vent. Hey, we have another shell curing. You can see how each thing builds onto something, the next step. But once all these molds are made, once all these shells are made, we'll be able to just go through this like duck soup. It'll be nobody. And of course we're hoping, you notice I have the big rubber hammer in case these don't want to release. See, now we're at the stage I can't even put my fingernail into that. It's reached that level of hardness. Well, now it's going to go to the next, within the next 12 to 24 hours, it's going to go to where it's like a rock. And then we'll hope we can pull those parts out without damaging the plugs. Well, we're almost near the end of the tape, and I wanted to make sure I get these photos on the tape. What's real important about having, look how big this picture is. These are like 8.5 by 11s. Let me use a pointer here. Look at this real closely now. Some of the things I would never be able to figure out that lettering from a smaller picture. I can see where Gary Levitz has his name on the cockpit. I can get a better shot at the lettering and the exhaust stacks, which we're going to make a separate mold for. And we're going to have to make the Griffin blisters and things like that. But the scoop, the outlet of the scoop, which for in our case I hope will be our pipe outlet, our little gear doors in the back. This little scoop area. Now if Fred had a picture of this, I don't know, I haven't looked at any of these real closely, but several things, when photos are this big, See what you can tend to do here, when a photo is this large, I can get this little shape. This is going to be something I really want to model. And look how convenient is that it'll make the tail a lot, I'm sure that's why it's there, is to make the tail post more rigid. I got to start laying out my canopy. What I did, I ordered one of every size canopy from SIG so I can decide exactly what I want to do. I also would like to try to make a take-apart cockpit so I don't have to make a cockpit for every time I make a fuselage. This scoop will be interesting to make a mold for. Griffin blisters are very similar to the Seafire. We've already made something similar to that. Now look, this is the kind of thing when you look at photos, this must be from a later or an earlier. Now this photo, it doesn't have the writing, and he has a different sponsorship up here. So just look at some of the things. I mean, you're just going to look at, now this one has the shield up here. I guess that's their insignia for the racing team. Now you go back, flip to this picture, and this has a whole different side, doesn't have the Goodyear, so obviously maybe Fred could advise me on which one, what came first, the chicken or the Goodyear Racer or whatever. Has the lettering but no shield, and it has the Desethane. More lettering under here, but look how nice I can see that. When photos are this large, wow, does that make it nice. And I'll tell you, it's hard not to be inspired by this stuff, you know. It's just unbelievable. To me, this is the essence of the whole hobby. To just build non-scale-like models, it's probably, you know, it has its own rewards and they're easier to build for sure. And it might be a case that they fly better, or you can probably get the judges to buy them or whatever. But this is the essence of real model aviation. Some of these things, and I don't know how many we're going to be able to do, of course, but we're sure going to try to do our share. Now a photo like this, a close-up where I can see I can read the information on the contra props. And to Miss Ashley, I'll be wanting to do a rendition. Another thing too this shows me is the color of the exhaust pipes. You would think they're black. No, they're not. They're not gray. They're like a rust color. Well, that's another thing we can use when we make the mold for the exhaust stacks. But the main thing is the scoop. Need to get as much before I can cut that opening in a scoop, and I'm assuming it's the same as on the top. Now these are all photos, and of course, because Fred's a professional, these are all photos that we've never seen before. These are real close-up and personal. Another thing I can pick up off of this photo is the rudder, the 38. That point on the rudder, that rudder looks like it may have changed. Well, maybe it hasn't. It's the way the lettering is. See, in one picture, it's got red lettering. Now you go to the next photo and the lettering is either black or dark blue. Now you can really see the scoop shape here. Now Elliot, when you get to see these tapes and you're doing these drawings, I want to see that scoop shape. Just kidding, because Elliot was really helpful with the drawings. Even though I've kind of had to make some changes for the practical side of this. These are the kind of photos, I call them the up close and personal. You don't really, average people get to stand behind the, whatever you want to call it, behind the fence or something. They never get up close and personal. Maybe Fred's even got a telephoto lens here, but love the way that canopy opens up. What great detail shots. Fred, I can't tell, you know, I can't tell you how helpful these are going to be when it comes time to lay out the paintwork. We already have the red out being mixed by Randolph. I'll pass this video on and some of these pictures on to Bob Brookins so he can kind of look at that red. What we really need most of all is a picture of that scoop from the very front. Such a sad thing to think that, as you know, when these pictures were being taken, the clock was already ticking down to the end of Miss Ashley and Gary Levitz's, for all purposes, well, Gary's life and the plane's existence. So by Fred being able to capture this, it's the same as when I capture something on video and then the person passes away or whatever. We can share it, we can pass it around. It just constitutes something that to me is very important. Now you can see the scoop, tail wheels off the ground, the contra props are in sync. Well, Fred, I gotta tell you, what a set of photos. We can start putting two and two together here. When the lettering on the rudder was red, it looks like the scoop was the old P51 scoop. Maybe that's a way we can kind of identify it. The old pictures from the new one, obviously these were all not taken on the same day. And I remember, just like doing the Spitfire and the Seafire, how many variations of that plane exist. Now, if that picture doesn't make your blood boil, it's nice too. Now that I've documented this part of it with Fred's help, there's people all over the world, believe me, all over the world, that are going to be seeing and sharing the adventures of Miss Ashley. We've opened up the door to more people understanding what Reno Air Races are all about. That book, you got to read that book. That was a flip-out, drop-dead, have never read anything better book. And I don't read a lot of books. I'm not a reader. I'm a worker bee. Now keep in mind, Fred does scale documentation photos professionally, so boy, give him a call. His name is in Pampa. We've had his name up on a screen many times. Anytime he can help you out with something on Strega, Tsunami, Fred Cronenwet. He's in Pampa. I remember him sending me stuff years ago when I didn't realize how good his stuff was. And I got the package in the mail, I almost flipped out. I did Red Baron stuff, and I saw the lettering. The lettering was so hard to do. I needed some documentation to sketch it out. Cool picture, guys working on a motor with the contra props coming up in sync. Assumption that when the airplane had the red lettering on the back, the 38, it has the Mustang scoop. When it has the dark lettering on the rudder, it then has the what I'll call NASCAR scoop. There's probably hundreds of other modifications, but that's just one. And by knowing that, I can make as much as I'm going to be deviating from scale, really more than a scale modeler would, by a lot in fact, at least I can get as much of that in the bank as possible. I think for all purposes, the Reno Air Racers constitute the most exciting, most flamboyant set of aeroplanes that you could ever possibly want to model as semi-scale models or even as scale model. What a great scale model this would make. Oh, with the black lettering and the new modern scoop. And I'll tell you another thing that, you know, it's hard to describe this feeling, but when you're dealing with people that are world class at what they do, there's just something about the fact that they're world class and they're willing to share it with you that to me is unbelievable. I mean, I wish I lived in a time with great artists, great sculptors, great whatever they were, and I could learn from them and I could watch them. If we had video of Leonardo da Vinci or whatever, you know, Michelangelo, we don't have anything. And I'm going to try to do my part to document the stuff that I know, whatever little niche I have in the world. Fred, again, thanks a million. Now, I could be wrong, but I remember, or I think I remember Fred also mentioning he was putting up some Miss Ashley pictures on his website or creating a dedicated website. I'll have to check with Elliot, the webmaster, and see if that's true. Anyway, here's his phone number, 818-719-0167, and he is a pro. The truth. And everybody who ever makes a mold, there's a moment of truth, and that's trying to get the plug out without destroying it. These are little nylon wedges that I've found handy for just this thing. Again, a lot of times what I found handy is to just run hot water around where the PVA is. Oops. And there's times these come right out, and there's times you could cry they don't want to come out so bad. Now, because we're trying to do these parts sequentially, the biggest parts last. Ooh, I hear it moving. I'm trying to do this and not destroy the plug. I'll just work my way down with this. You can get the picture. You go right down inch by inch. That's funny, even on that video that comes from Germany, where they're real professional mold makers, they're releasing a wing, and you can see there's a moment of anxiety. This is not a part coming out. What you want to try to do is just not rip the whole thing off at once. See if the other one will come off. Oh, the little one came right off. And of course we'll clean that up with soap and water, buff it out, polish it all out, and probably wind up spending the rest of the night chiseling away around all the edges. The idea is not to rip it up this way. That's when you put it straight. It's to get something sharp under the edge all the way around and just keep working it until you get that part off. I found that this is a good, actually I'm sorry I didn't think of this sooner. I took one of these maybe this is an invention, maybe it isn't, these spackle knives and ran it on a belt sander until it was sharp, because what I was doing, all these thin layers of cloth under here were catching on, and I was afraid to just yank on it, but it seems like and in the mold maker's trade, which I'm certainly not a professional or anything, but hey, but I'm kind of proud of this guy. looks like a big highlight mitt or something. Anyway, the first part of our mold, and we're going to trim this off. We can run over and trim this all off. We don't need all this fluff hanging off of it. You can see one of the errors that I made was I didn't have enough of a radius in this one little spot. And that looks like that might be, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I can't be sure. There was a little crack in here, and I think that was a crack that was in there just from the original time I sanded through. Certainly nothing here I can't live without, and here I needed to put a little more radius in the next plug. This one is virtually flawless. The little one is flawless. And hey, we're at the end of this tape, but we're ready on the next tape to start working with the higher tech resins, the resins that we're going to ultimately make the fuselage out of. And it looks like after trimming and polishing and cleaning, that's about as I couldn't. If I can get the top part of the fuselage to come out this well, yeah, everything. See, this is just PVA. That comes right out. There's one little flaw here, and I will polish that out. That's no problem. This mold will buff up just like a fiberglass boat. Now I just feel like in the course of making this tape, we've moved our mold making at least to the point where we can start to think about making molds this large and this complex. And basically had some real good luck with the Aerospace Composites tooling resin. We've added another carbon fiber gear to our inventory here. And now that these are kind of just redundant to make. Even with the new resin, the only downside of the new resin, of course, is it needs to be post-cured and it needs more time in the mold than the other resin. So we might need to make a second mold if demand for these parts keeps up. But in the meantime, they're basically on a one-a-day cycle basis now in the shop. Now I noticed using the new resin, I've got a couple of bubbles in this one. These are not usable, but the only downside of this resin, if you decide to use this combination, be prepared for a little longer time in the mold, and of course for the post-curing, which we have to do some experiments to see what the maximum amount. They say between 8 and 16 hours at between 140 and 180. Well, it's going to require a little testing before we can figure exactly what we want to do with that. The biggest thing, it gave us an exercise in using this tool and resin and making relatively large parts relative to the wheel pants and the other things that we've been making. So I'm excited. The only problem is we're at the end of the tape, and I was hoping I'd get a part laid up on this tape. Well, it's not really going to happen, but after I trim and polish these molds, absolutely the next thing is going to be to lay some of these up. I'm looking forward to that already. The next step for our molds is going to be obviously go over to the jigsaw, trim these all off, clean them up with some Windex or some just plain soapy water. Now, the only thing I can say here is cutting this, good idea to have a fine tooth, relatively new blade. And then I'll trim this off on a belt sander. Again, now I can trim all these trudy edges up on the belt sander with this. Even though we're not going to use this edge, I just want to have it true and clean, so I'm not razor blading my hands up any worse than I have to when I'm using it. And the last part of this is just to get rid of the PVA, which usually most of it will come off just with water. I like to use a little soapy water. I want to look for any little flaws in this that need to be polished out or repaired. Probably up there we're going to need to do some cleanup. Again, I feel kind of good about this because after 4 years of using the rubber molding technique and getting that to where I feel is perfected to the point where I'm real happy with it anyway. Using hard molds, again, you need to have all draft angles positive. You can't have negative, realistically, a lot of negative or really any negative draft angles. Now this edge is where we should have made the part just, I can see we could have made it a little bit nicer, but the final piece is going to get laminated, glued. In the final analysis, I think that's going to leave a, well, it's going to be a usable mold, is what my feeling is right now. And with the material we have in house, we're going to be able to lay up parts in the next couple of days. And so the obvious question is, are we going to get parts from these molds? Now I can just picture one scenario. We could use well, we're definitely going to use the glass bottom piece or carbon. We're definitely going to use that little piece in the back, and we're going to use a molded shell up here. What we're really looking to do is see if we can replace this piece, and we're going to make that plug within the next video or so, replicate the same thing into the mold, and try to get, again, we're doing it as building blocks, starting with the smallest piece and working our way up to the most complex piece. It's the same old routine that we used on the plug. In this case, I'm definitely not going to try to skimp by with one less coat. 4 coats apart all, an hour apart, buffed as highly as I possibly can. And you can see this, the gel coat really is beautiful. I mean, yeah, I just don't want to have gel coat in my final parts. I want to sand them out and have a rough finish that I can lay in my dope finish on. But you certainly could make, if you were making an RC plane, you could use that finish right in there, that's for sure. Another chance, there was a couple little flaws from that original plug in here that I managed using a little bit of Gorham's and some wet and dry sandpaper. And now I'm just, in fact, the last little bit, there it goes. Try to get it polished up and polished out as much as possible. In fact, I'm trying to plan this because we're in the holiday season. Try to get the PVA on here tonight. If that is the case, wow. Because virtually every night we have family things to do here. And being the wonderful family man that I am. Anyway, hey, when you see what I bought my wife for Christmas, she's going to flip out. I know even Buzz Brodak's going to flip out. Hey. Anyway, that mold is, boy, that's polishing. I'm a little bit impressed with this. Now, if we can only get the plug and the top part, and we can do a little test piece on this on the next video, hey, wild. That's going to work. What I found, too, that is real helpful is polishing the successive coats with nice, clean Bounty towels. Just like buffing out a plane, trying to get a real nice shine on it. And this is ready. We're actually ready right now to spray on a. I'm gonna go for the maximum safe way and get 4 coats of PVA on there, and we'll be ready to run our test piece. little nitpicky details I have to work out here. And you can imagine if you were going to lay up a mold like this and you didn't have a base, something to hold it in place. So what I did, I took out some, again, we're trying to do this on what amounts to be a very small budget. You know, if we were in a tool shop environment or machine shop or working for a big company, we just go over to the, you know, the aluminum bars or something and make something up professional. Well, this always puts you to the test as to if you can figure out how to do things on a real budget. I made these two little blocks of wood, which I think they're going to work. And then I have to make up some kind of a gizmo for the other one. Because as we're laying this up, and we may even need to cut some of that off so we can, ultimately we're going to vacuum bag parts in this. I may have to cut some of that off. Well, thanks a lot for joining us. The only thing left to do here tonight is put the PVA on the mold. Check out what else has been going on in the universe and the world of stunt. Again, please share the tapes with all your friends, and please, hey, if there's something you liked about the video, tell me. If you don't like them, hey, tell me too. You won't be hurting my feelings. And thanks for joining us. Man, it's a little late to be putting a PVA on here tonight, but hey, I'm kind of happy the way this all worked out. These little legs, the glue is drying on the legs. As soon as that glue dries, I'll be ready to lay out the PVA. A lot of times, just before I go to sleep at night, I'm happy with a day's production. I flip on this little piece of video, and I like to end all my videos with something real positive and fun and inspirational. It gives me something to think about at night. So we had kind of a good day with these molds, and this is one of my little favorite pieces of video. And the kid says, oh, as this thing is flying at him, oh, Cadillac in the sky. This is really good. I must have played this 2,000 times. And Gerald Champ waves to him. Look at this. Oh, Cadillac in the sky. Great way to end the day. Great way to end the molding day. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the tapes.
I touched him! I felt the heat! I can taste him in my mouth! Oil and carbide! Jim, come back to the hospital! I need some help with the hospital! Dr. Rollins, do you remember how we helped to build the runway? We died like the others! I'm going to be in the runway!
I have to admit, it has been an exciting couple of weeks working on these guys. And even if this project doesn't totally pan out, we're going to have learned from it for sure, and it's going to become part of the modeling skills that we can draw on for future models.